we go.
There it goes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelson, professional horse trainer, and with me once again, my partner, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. And you look very wintry with your scarf
Wintry.
on
I've got a
today.
t-shirt on, but my neck is cold. I don't know.
So today's topic is literally riding from the inside out. We thought that was a great topic because we were struggling with how to
Hmm.
convey that trying to mimic a good rider does not make us a good rider. Like,
That's so true.
yeah.
Can I duplicate that? Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is what looks like what we would call a classically correct seat, whether it's
Mm,
Western, whether it's English, whether it's 2 point or half seat position or jockey position, all good riders kind of look the same in their classical posture or riding use because it is the result of the right
mm.
internal coordination. And what it feels like is hard to mimic because what it feels like and what it looks like are really pretty different. And so most people, especially horse people, they always tell me, I'm a visual learner. I have to
Ah.
see it. And I go, okay. But at the end of the day, we can watch a million good riders
Mhm.
and try to kind of force our body into what we think is that position.
Mhm.
But the whole purpose of a beautiful classical riding position is because it's functional, not because it
It's
looks
right
good.
on the inside. It's right on the inside, and we just see it, and we can't. It's not a place. It's an internal way of organizing yourself,
Right. And it's
right?
kind of like we can watch a lot of people play basketball and we can sort of tell who's good at it and who's not good at it, right?
Good point.
But trying to mimic a basketball player's style who's really athletic, that internal coordination is what makes them a good basketball player.
That's so funny that you bring that up because if you think of comparing me to a basketball player, I'm 5'1".
Right.
How am I possibly going to mimic a 6 foot whatever
Seven
person,
foot, whatever.
whatever,
Yeah.
trying to achieve that? So it's so
But,
interesting how our mind works that we think, oh, I know I can figure that out by looking at it. That cracks me up.
well, it's kind of funny you went there because I also go, just because you're 5'1" and you're not 7 feet doesn't mean you can't play basketball really well.
Exactly.
And just because somebody is 7 feet and built to play basketball doesn't mean they can play well. It doesn't mean they
Exactly.
have the athletic coordination for it. So I go, that's kind of it's a good example of how riding works. Like I used to always go, oh, I'm built like a jockey, right? I've got this long torso, short legs. I'm tiny, so of course I gravitated to jumping and um
Right.
and none of
I
that was
totally get
true.
that.
Like
I
none
totally
of
wanted
that.
to be the 6 foot skinny dressage person
I know, right? Who's built for riding, right? Which
built for
usually
riding.
usually means a short torso, long legs that you can kind of
Mhm.
wrap around the horse's
They
barrel to
just look
stand.
elegant. It's like, how do I do that with the body I have? That's a
Yeah,
good question. How do I do that with the body I have?
that's the question for all of
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
Even if we're born with the perfect body for riding, it doesn't mean you can ride.
Exactly.
Like
Because
it
it's all
was,
about how you internally have a conversation
well, and what's
about
so
your
funny
use.
is my niece who does CrossFit training, she's like super athletic, right?
Hmm.
And she's over 6 feet. She's just built like a tank, and she wanted to ride. And her first ride on one of my horses, she did all the same human mistakes.
Isn't that interesting? And I find that with putting Alexander technique teachers on horses.
Yeah, they make all the same
They
human
make all the
instinctual
pretty much same
mistakes.
mistakes. The only one
Yeah.
that didn't was she was what we call a master instructor. So she had been teaching 40 years. And she got on and was not disrupted by the movement of the horse. She went right into Alexander thinking immediately. And she was the first one I was like, wow, that's the first time that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. And that's 40 years
That's
of
40 years of
really
Alexander
working
work.
with her own
Hmm.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did she describe, was it her first ride?
Yeah, it was, her sister, I think, is an avid horsewoman, but the Alexander teacher is a dancer. So they never really connected. I think it was maybe
Ooh, I
her
gotta say, dancer also, the
she's very
experiences,
connected. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Um, it was maybe her second or third time on a horse, and she actually went to her sister's farm here in Virginia, and said, I have a student that wants me to get on a horse and take some pictures. So it was very improv, that she did it. She actually did it for me for my thesis. So it was quite fascinating to see the pictures that I got.
And so I'm curious how she described it too, her experience of it. Because what you
I
saw, like I know
Yeah.
when somebody really nails the right coordination, I
Hmm.
recognize it because I don't see the person doing anything.
She had, how do I explain it? She had complete softness. There wasn't that look on her face like, oh my gosh, I really got to get this. Or, you know, she was just up there. Oh, look at, I think maybe that's it. As Alexander teachers, we're kind of very adaptable and, oh, well, look at this. And how do I use my body
And
correctly from the
so,
knowledge base I have in this situation?
well, and what I want to kind of bring up is you have a perspective of what you
Mhm.
called a beautiful ride, that she sort of got it, and she had a perspective internally of what that ride felt like. So
Right.
what was that for you and for her? Like what did the ride look like to you and what did the ride feel like to her? Or did she describe what it felt like?
She never really described it, but it was amazing. She just, every picture, she had a smile on her face, and she's just letting the horse walk around the ring, and like
So
no big deal.
other than a smile on her face, was she in sort of what you would consider a good riding posture?
Yeah, I was considering, she wasn't even in riding attire.
Hmm.
She just kind of, I think it's because she didn't have any expectations of what it should look like. Maybe that's
Right.
it. She
And so
didn't.
she ended up looking like a good rider who
Mhm.
had years of experience because of how she was managing her body.
Exactly. Very
Like
well said.
a newbie rider to me, the human instinct when we get on a horse, and this was what my niece did as well, is we sort of pull the legs in. You can see the legs and arm muscles tighten, and you can see the head, the midline, the core, the seat start moving a lot. So the limbs get
Yeah,
tight and the center of the body gets loose. And that's
good way to
just
put it.
instinct. So that's what we all do when we're first on a horse, unless I think the exceptions are, like you said, a master Alexander technique instructor, and she's a dancer. Because I also found that's the one sort of skill. If people come to riding being very good at martial arts or dancing,
Oh, so they're really connected to their body use. Just,
yeah,
yeah,
and the description I get back is they do an exceptional job, but when I ask them what was their perspective of that internally, they're like, that is really hard. Like it's
Mm,
harder than dancing or martial arts because it's not just managing your own body. You're
exactly.
managing your own body in the context of constant forces that are trying to disrupt your body. And that skill of martial arts or dancing, or somebody who's really good at the Alexander technique, that internal awareness of how to
Hmm.
coordinate, which takes conscious effort and awareness, no
Right.
matter.
It starts on the outside and it evolves to the inside. Yeah.
Right. And so, or once we've worked from the inside, that applies to a lot of different situations. And that's
Oh
what
my
good
gosh.
writing is. So it's like, I think it was some famous dance studio put footprints on the floor, right? To get people to start learning how to
Ah.
dance. I go, but that's never going to make you a good dancer to try to place your feet in the right footprints,
In somebody else's shoes.
literally,
Literally.
right? Or I've watched a million Bruce Lee movies and it doesn't make me any better at martial arts. I go,
I c-
it amazes me, but I go, Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee, I go, they're phenomenal to watch, but watching them over and over doesn't make me a martial artist, right?
exactly.
I would have to practice it. I would have to develop those skills. I would have to feel what it feels like and kind
Right.
of go through all that trial and error and build up my body to be able to do that.
I think you brought up something really important, the trial and error.
Oh, yeah. And that's a big
That and
deal.
the amount of, let's just say, failing is huge.
Well, because the vocabulary we're using to train riders all have to do with the extremities. And so it sort of, in a way, panders to human instinct. Because human instinct, when anybody gets, even the most athletically built person like my niece, when she got on a horse, those legs gripped
Mhm.
and the arms got tight and her seat and core, you could really see the amount of effort she was using to try to stabilize her core. And it's
Right.
not that she didn't know how, right? She obviously knew how.
And that not
Um,
but not in that situation.
and I've
Yeah.
seen the same when I've worked with yoga instructors,
Mm.
Pilates
Pilates
instructors,
instructors.
even a
Yep,
lot
me too.
of a lot of Alexander technique instructors. It's like it does not instantly transfer for people.
Right.
It really takes a higher degree of being familiar with your own coordination
Mhm.
to get on a horse and instantly look like a good rider.
And I feel that even proprioception is really important. Where is my body in time and space? What is the relationship like?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of riding instruction is sort of pandering to the limbs, because what do we hear? We
Well, we do that with
hear,
horses too. We look at the limbs and not the back. So,
right, but
yeah.
we hear heels down,
Yeah.
right? Keep your legs still. Um, put your elbow to the horse's mouth should be a straight line,
That's straight line theory. Yep.
right?
Love it.
Look where you're going, which causes
Yep.
people to over twist the neck a lot.
We should do a whole new vocabulary.
Well, and we've done podcasts on each one of
Yeah.
these, right? So even the shoulders back, look where you're going. These are the
Hmm.
things that, you know, are are speaking to the limbs. And the limbs instinctually are already overworking because
Hmm.
that's the human instinct is to sort of grip with the limbs because we're straddling something that's unstable,
Right.
right? And until we learn how to cope with that instability through our pelvis, spine, and head, we can't let go of the limbs or we would
And
fall off.
that's
Like,
really important that you bring that up because it has you have to bring the subconscious to the conscious to
yeah,
make the correction to be able to do it. And
yeah.
it takes a lot of time, energy, thinking, non-thinking to get there.
Well, and maybe that's what we're talking about is the people who can get on and instantly sort of figure out their balance on a horse, which is rare.
Right,
It's more the
right.
exception than the rule. They're already very consciously aware of how to use their body. That's the difference, whether we're talking a
Good
dancer or
point.
a martial artist, is that conscious awareness is already there. So then
I
they just
really
have
think,
to put it in the context of this moving force that's right under their seat.
and I personally think jockeys are really good at it, or they wouldn't be able to do what they do.
Yeah, all professional jockeys are amazing, and the strength it takes
Hmm.
is phenomenal.
Yeah,
But how they organize their body with the that amount of power and speed and stay stable, it's a very specific coordination of the body, and they have to be aware of it
right,
in order to just stay on.
right.
Yeah, so I think the instruction we get is basically telling us how to cope with our instinct of gripping with the limbs. I think that's the best case scenario is that heels down,
Mhm.
shoulders back, look where you're going, keep your elbows here, like all of that stuff. It focuses on the limbs and it sort of tells us how to organize the limbs a little bit, but it never addresses
Mhm.
the place of our body, the seat and the core muscles that are receiving the brunt of the force. And
And
part of
that's a lot of information coming up through your seat, through your back. And I mean, there's just so much information coming from the horse.
well,
It can
and
be
coming
extremely overwhelming,
like with jockeys, they don't sit their butt in the saddle. And there's a
right?
reason, right? So the jockey position is almost a horizontal alignment of the
Mhm.
skull and spine and pelvis over the
Yeah, it's
horse,
beautiful.
right?
It's beautiful.
And the reason we have a jumping position, the reason we post the trot, and the reason we have a jockey position is because we need our hip, knee, and ankle joint to absorb all those forces of motion because our pelvis and spine can't cope.
That
There's no way.
you hit the nail on the head of what the opposite is of what we're taught.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
But
once
that's
we're,
all I pretty much do when I ride is all right, stabilize head, neck, back, and pelvis. Let legs and arms absorb all the shock.
yes,
Yeah, all my
exactly.
joints absorb the shock of the movement, not muscles, because the muscle cannot possibly handle
That
that
much
amount of
force.
information. It's
Mm-mm.
just not going to work.
No, we run out of muscular energy
Mhm.
very quickly.
Yeah.
And when our seat, and I kind of consider, I always have to say this, I consider the seat of the rider basically the base of the pelvis, the seat bones, up through the top of the skull. I go
Yeah,
that
we both
central
agree on that.
line,
We both agree on that because it's all connected. It's all the spine, the same thing in the horse, same thing in the rider. It's all one thing.
right?
Yeah.
And so what I see people doing a lot is mimicking good riders. Like they're
Mhm.
watching dressage tests. They're trying to mimic the dressage riders.
Right.
And it's not something we can mimic. It's something that the only way to develop a classically beautiful seat, that's the result of the internal coordination. And
Riding from the inside out. Yep.
it's a functional issue. Like I go, the importance of becoming a good rider is because that's the only way we can help horses move better. Like
Good point.
we have a dynamic influence on the horse's movement because we are weight and mass. And so if we're using our limbs to stabilize and our seat is unstable, the horse is also going to mimic that dynamically.
Right.
And so we get stiff legs, sore muscles, poor
Very
movement.
sore.
Yeah, bouncy trots and canters or big movement that we can't sit. And it's like, even the rising trot, to me, that was a very clever invention of some excellent rider going, I can't sit
I
this
can't
trot
sit this. Well,
because the
just think
trot's
about the
not good.
cowboy riding for hours.
Right,
I could be mistaken, but I'm thinking the trot for the horse is the best gait to travel long distances other than walking. But a cowboy is not going to sit that trot for hours on end.
right. No, and so posting the trot, again, that's taking our shock absorption from our torso
Mhm.
to our leg joints. That's the purpose of it. So if we're riding really turbulent movement, right, high speeds or a bouncy trot or a trot we really struggle to stay stable on through our seat, the posting is what alleviates the work of the core muscles. It
Yeah.
keeps the pelvis and spine stable when that is difficult. And that's the purpose of the half seat 2 point position or jockey position as well, is our leg joints are a whole lot more effective working as shock absorbers than the joints between each vertebra.
So that really brings up a question for me. Why do we lose that joint ability to absorb all the impact when we're posting or 2 point when we sit? So that's a really,
Because
really
that
good
instinct
question.
is not
The
addressed.
instinct overrides and says, grip, grip, grip.
So the instinct to grip with our arms and legs, if we don't address that first and foremost, then imagine if you're gripping with your legs, your hip joints locked, your knee joints
Yes.
locked, and when you jam your heels down, you're
Mhm.
braced, but you're not, you can no longer use that ankle as a
Right,
shock absorber.
right.
Because once we fix the joints, which is what gripping with the legs does,
Mhm.
we have no more shock absorption.
And it goes to pure physiology because as soon as you contract a tissue, a soft tissue, you shut down the proprioceptors.
You can't feel the
Just
horse.
you can't feel anything.
Hmm.
So you've pretty much shut off the communication between you and your horse.
Yeah, and the number of times riders have told me I need to see what it looks like because I don't have feel. And I go, okay, those two things just moved to the top of our training list.
Top of the list. And
Right,
what's really interesting about it is the horse themselves, their kinesthetic sense of feel is their primary thing.
right. That's their
That's
primary
their
sense.
primary sense that we need to communicate with.
Right,
So we should be evolving to the level of that.
right. And until we find enough stability through our pelvis and spine while we're on a horse, there's
Mhm.
no freaking way you have your leg joints available, or you can soften your arms, or you can have what I would consider a true rein contact with the horse,
Right.
because all of that restriction through the arms and legs and that restriction is going to be there. It's not something we can override with our brain. This is a visceral response outside of
Mhm.
the brain happening in the nervous system
Mhm.
because that fear of falling is a
Yep.
deep, deep
Deep, deep. Well, it's
instinct.
fetal. It's fetal.
Hmm.
It's a very powerful safety mechanism.
Absolutely. Don't fall
Yeah.
down. That's kind of the
Don't fall
number.
down.
That's
And how many times as a parent, or have you heard from your parent, oh, be careful, don't fall. I mean, there's a whole setup that we've set up in our brain that falling is a bad thing.
no, that's instinct. We're born
Yeah.
with that. Horses are born with that. Like that fear of falling, I think even in like infant research, it's one of the first things we learn are edges and depth, to help us not fall. And so the fear of falling is what causes us to grip instinctually with the limbs. And the skill of riding is learning how to transfer that stability from the limbs to the torso. And
And
it's difficult because underneath our torso, even if we're in a cart driving, underneath our torso is where all the forces of motion are entering our
yeah.
body,
And it's
right?
huge. It's a ton of information.
Yeah, and if we're talking about an unbalanced horse, we've got rough conditions, right?
Yeah.
We've got torrid rivers or stormy seas that we're trying to balance on. But we can, and that's what sort of dancers, martial artists,
Hmm.
that's what they figured out is how to adapt around the forces of motion in order to maintain equilibrium. And
Right.
that's what good riding is in a nutshell. And you can't really just watch somebody and figure that out. I mean, maybe some people can. I'm sure there's people out there who have just observed and figured it out for themselves. But at the end of the day, we can't look at ourselves in a mirror and try to put our body in a position
Mhm.
and have it work.
And I think that is all of that is key. I mean, it's trial and error. You've got to be willing to mess up, mess up, mess up, mess up until you get there. But it also comes down to it's almost pure physics. It's,
It is pure physics.
yeah, get your
There,
center of mass over the center of mass.
yeah, yeah.
And it that sounds easy, but it's kind of like two planets evolving and trying to communicate at the same time.
Well, and I look at sort of all of our traditional training for riders, and I go, this is like a monumental oversight. It's just a
Wow, that's a good way to put it.
it's a stupendous problem that I went through myself. I was trained traditionally
Oh, so
and,
was I by a
spent
German riding instructor. So
spent years. And the other method of training is just stick on the horse and don't fall off and
hold on.
get enough wet saddle blankets till you figure it out, right? Get on a bunch of different horses and again, it's a little bit the sink or swim method. There are better ways to learn,
True.
but that's sort of what we've relied on traditionally is either give those limbs something to do, right? Or you figure it out.
Yeah, go
Just
figure it out.
yeah, just keep getting on. Just figure it out, right? And
Well, it also goes back to what also that we always seek something outside of ourselves when really, coming from my perspective, all the answers are internal. All the
yeah, and I
struggle.
think that's what
Yeah.
happens when people try to mimic a good
Yeah,
rider, which I've done in the
exactly.
past too.
Yep, I get it.
I've been
Everybody wants to
trying to
win?
mimic what a good rider looks like
Hmm.
without knowing what that would feel like
Exactly.
and never got there.
And never got there.
And when I quit caring about what I looked like and I started to focus on what I felt, I was kind of surprised to see pictures of myself over time.
That's interesting.
And I
Because you
go,
didn't think it looked like it looked. It didn't feel like it looked.
I didn't care.
Yeah,
So I
that's
go,
that's probably the important part.
yeah. First of all, I didn't care anymore because I go, I'm not showing, I'm rehabbing horses. How I
Mm.
ride is a
Critical.
100% a functional issue.
Critical.
And
It's
I go, if
critical.
I look wonky, I don't care. Right. But what ended up happening is the more I refined my feel and my functionality as a rider, influencing the horse's movement, maintaining my stability despite the horse's movement,
Right.
right? All of that led me to look like a good rider. And I went, oh, that posture literally, classical riding is only important because it is functionally useful.
Good
And
point.
to
But
try
it's
to
not a place. It's not a picture.
to try to look that way
Yeah,
and miss the functionality of it, it never quite gets you there. Like you
I
go,
agree.
I still can't control this crookedness. I still can't control, oh, I always lean back too far, or I'm always a little too far forward, or my head's always tilted, or why do I do this, or I can't seem to keep my hands still, right? Or I can't seem to quit bouncing and sit the trot or whatever. And it's like
Yeah.
all of those little details that I hear as questions all the time.
Hmm.
I go, you can't get there from here because you're still trying to
That's a
force
good
your
point.
heels down and put your shoulders back and sit up straight and all
Right.
all these things that don't address, they actually restrict your ability to be functionally dynamic with the
Y-
horse.
You gave me a total wake-up call years ago when you came, when you used to come once a month. I have a big picture in my living room of me when I was like 12 or 13 going over a jump. And
Oh, yeah.
you looked at that picture and you went, "What happened to those long legs?" I was like, "Damn it." Okay.
Yeah.
So I started this whole exploration of what happened to them. Why? And
Yeah,
it was
because
that
that picture,
pulling
how
up.
old were you in that picture?
I was maybe 12.
Yeah. And it was just this beautiful picture. It was a classically beautiful
Hmm.
jump rider, right? Going
And I
over
didn't
the
look
jump.
5'1".
Not at all.
Not at all.
You looked like you had a rider's body. Your back was
Right.
just beautiful and long. You're in a perfect 2 point in the middle of the motion of the horse, and your legs did not look short at all.
No,
And to look
no,
at that picture, you would never look at that rider as jockey size. And you were on a big
exactly.
horse. You were not on a small horse.
No, he was like 15'3".
Okay, so good size horse,
Good size,
right?
just
And you're
average,
five
average.
one.
Yep.
So it was an interesting, it was a question mostly to myself that I probably said out loud was I was like,
Well, it
how
sent me
does
on a year-long of riding bareback, which was very educational. Don't recommend it for everybody, but
that'll
where
stretch
did,
your legs out?
yeah, where did that, why did I go there? What happened in that time frame? It was just an
Yes.
interesting exploration that I went on, and it brought up a lot of realizations of going on the inside to find it. It wasn't on
Yes.
the outside. It was definitely an exploration I had to find within me.
Well, and I think what's powerful about those pictures is like sort of we came to it from the opposite direction, but that picture of you riding naturally as a 12-year-old, it's
Mhm.
like it's in there.
It's
It's in
there.
there
We all
somewhere,
have it. We
right?
all innately have very healthy organizational skills.
Yeah, and when I was coming up in traditional training, it always kind of bothered me. I felt very complimented if somebody said I was a good rider, but I had no idea what
Mm.
that meant.
Yeah, what is that?
And it always sort of stumped me when somebody would look around an arena and pick out, that's a really good rider. And I'm like, what are you seeing that's
Good point.
telling you that? And it was really a mystery. Nobody could kind of explain it to me. They go,
Hmm.
oh, you just sort of can tell. So it's like years and years later, I go, now I can break it down. Now I know what that means. That
Yeah.
means somebody who can stay stable through the pelvis and
Mhm.
spine is going to be supple through the limbs. That's the only way you can do it.
Exactly. That's how the body works. It
Like
just
the
works
body
that way.
needs equal parts mobility and stability in order to not fall or fall
Right.
off, right? So if that stability is in the arms and legs, it's not in the central axis of the body. And
Exactly.
the only way to get the arms and legs soft and stable is by bringing all of that muscular effort from the limbs to the middle. I
Right.
go, that's where we have to adjust and adapt and use more strength is in the deeper core muscles, not in the
Hmm.
outer muscles. And heels down, shoulders back, sit up straight, look where you're going. I go, that just gets in the way.
It does. And we talk about you and I, plus in the Alexander community, always talking about the words we use really have a huge effect
Well, and one
on
of the
our
first
students.
things when I get a rider, especially if they tell me they want to go to a higher level and they want to
Mm,
compete, I go, the first thing I do is take away everything and go, okay, you can have your saddle and your reins, but you're going to hold the reins at the buckle and you're going to grab mane. And that's going to teach you if you need to grip, you're going to grip mane, right? While you're figuring out your torso balance and then drop the stirrups, let your legs dangle, right? And only by sort of taking away the stirrups and taking away the reins do people start to become aware of how much effort they're using in their arms and legs.
That was my exploration bareback for a
Yeah, and
year.
what's
Yeah, same thing.
amazing, whether it's bareback or just dropping your stirrups, some
Hmm.
people grip more at
Oh,
first,
I agree because
right?
it's scary.
Right. I go and some people think bareback riding, you should still be mimicking heels down, shoulders back, look where you're going, right? And that's how you build strength in the legs is by gripping harder. And I go, but it's still the more you stabilize the limbs and put effort there, the more unstable the seat and the pelvis and spine become. And that's ultimately never going to make you look like a good rider
The
because
ponytail flop,
functionally it's backwards.
totally backwards. Yeah,
It's completely backwards. So if we're not stable in the core muscles and the center of the body, we can't use our leg joints as shock absorbers.
exactly.
We can't have soft hands. We can't keep our legs still. They're going to be swinging all over the place because they're so stiff. And so that's the I just it was sort of shocked to go all of our training is pandering to what humans do instinctually when they get on a horse. And
Hmm.
every one out of 1,000 riders either figures it out or finds a good teacher who helps them reverse that instinct, right? And consciously learn to control the pelvis and the spine and deal with all those forces of motion. And I think when we start to focus on our own skeletal stability through our torso,
Hmm.
we instantly start riding better. We look better.
Oh,
And
our
I go,
timing and feel is so much faster.
yeah. So the what a good rider to me means is that they look stable but soft. There's
Yeah.
no excessive gesture. There's no sort of bouncing around. There's no tension or gripping. And it doesn't mean they're not working their butts off on the inside, but you can't
Right.
see it from the outside.
Right. And that's what we want. That's what our eyes are telling us is the jam on the bread, you know?
Yeah, it is. Because
Is that
there's a
ease that
quality
it
of
is.
soft but stable, easy. Yeah,
Right.
looks
That
effortless.
easy place. We talk about
Hmm.
that easy place. It's finding the easy place or
Yeah, but
neutral or whatever you want to call it.
the ironic part is it's hard work to get there. It's
Oh
hard
yeah,
work
you're
to get to that easy
internally
place
working
because,
quite a bit.
and mo a lot of it is mental. A lot of it is where
Totally
we're
agree with that.
focused while we're riding. And the less we care about how we look, everybody goes through that experience about being surprised that they look so good. And this is why you and I whip out our phones at every lesson is because
Yep.
what they think feels right and looks good,
Mhm.
I take a picture of. Then we start taking away stirrups and reins, and I have them play with their torso balance, take another picture because it feels so terrible to them
When
because
it's foreign.
it's not what they expected,
Hmm.
right? Good riding does not feel like what it looks like at all.
Exactly.
It's
That's a good point.
Yeah, it feels completely different on the inside to what it looks like on the outside, which is why we can't just look at it and mimic it because it's kind of complicated in there. There's a lot going on.
Good. Very true.
But people are often surprised at how classically good they look after making some changes with, changing that focus from extremities to
Hmm.
the axis and feeling their way into their balance. right?
I think some of the best rides I have, and it's always in a safe place, is when I turn off my vision
hmm
and
Or
just
you
ride
turn
with my
it
eyes
internal.
closed.
Like
Or
I
I can
turn,
turn it internal. I had to
Mhm.
start riding with my eyes closed. I can now do like the third eye thing and just tune in. But at the beginning, I had to just close my eyes. I had to turn that sensory organ off.
Yeah.
And then the amount of information that comes to you kinesthetically through feel is huge.
Well, and I want to just interject a little geeky side note that helped me was realizing that our eyeballs are just the camera lenses
Right,
and that where we actually see is all the way at the back of our brain, past
right.
like any open orifices. It's like there's
It's at the
no
optic nerve at the very back of your skull.
very back of the
Hmm.
skull in this dark closet is where we actually
The
see,
dark closet.
right? And I go, wow, so our vision is actually like in a dark closet or it's in the basement.
Hmm. It's in
It's
the
not
it's in developing X-rays, the old-fashioned way.
right. And so when
Yeah.
I realized that, I thought part of the power of feeling my way was to picture myself as a skeleton or
Oh, I like that.
to sort of picture myself as a tensegrity system or all of these different geeky things that we've talked about or that I've studied or read about. And I go, why couldn't I? It's not dependent on my eyes. I
Exactly.
could sort of picture um, a sailor getting his sea legs or
Hmm.
feeling the movement like a river of force. And I could play
Hmm.
with my mind in ways and see things in a different way. And that really helped me develop the feel that I needed. And then developing the feel, I looked better in pictures. I was like, I don't know when that happened, but
And also the horses love it.
the feedback from the horse is
Yeah.
really a huge guide. And when we
Huge
take
guide.
away bad behavior, naughtiness, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah, I go, the horses give us pretty good feedback,
Hmm.
right? Like, why does my horse stop at the same jump all the time? Why does my horse miss this canter lead all the time? How am I playing a
How
role
am
in
I
this?
influencing that? Exactly.
Hmm
I think if we brought the question, the why, back to us, how we're using our body, we would find much better results from our horse.
Right, because all humans, we all share the same skeleton, the same
Mhm.
anatomy. And that's why all good riders, that's why we have classical correct riding postures, is because
Right.
when the human body nails the right functional balance, like when we can stabilize the right way and use our body parts according to the way they're designed to be used,
Exactly.
right?
Good way to put it.
Then we look like a good rider as a
We seamless. It's
result.
like seamless. Yeah.
Yeah. And by that point, you don't really care anymore either. And I think that lack of trying takes any excess
Mm.
tension out of the mix too.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. That ego coming up.
Oh, the one thing I hated my whole life was you try too hard. And I go, how do
I
you
hear that.
not
Us
try?
Jack Russells
I
do that,
know.
don't we?
I just hate it when people said you try too hard.
Yeah, just let it go.
I go, I don't know how to not try.
Right.
But that kind of comes full circle back to how I used my vision. That allowed me to feel like I was trying, but not in a physical way. I was using
Oh, wow. Deep.
that
That's
changed a
deep.
lot because I
Right.
couldn't, as long as I was physically trying to get it right,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
couldn't get there. And
Oh,
what
that's what Alexander work's all about is the non-doing of it all.
I know, that's what makes me crazy.
I know.
And so I had to give my busy little mind
A
something to
job.
focus
A
on and
job.
give it a job to let my body kind of find its way
Mhm.
to take away that internal instinct to just try and try. And so knowing that vision happens in a dark closet, I go, whatever I
Hmm.
picture is what my body's going to organize towards. So
Totally.
I started picturing a stable pelvis, right? I started
Ah,
picturing a spine that stayed in an ideal alignment. I started picturing all my core muscles figuring out what to do without me.
without my mind.
Without my conscious direction, right?
Yeah, good way to put it.
And sort of went, if I just keep, and it for me, it took it down to these invisible lines of force that I could really kind of focus on and feel at the same time.
That's a good one.
So, like, I use these images, like with riders, if we imagine our pelvis is like a rubber ball and our spine and head are like a stick with another ball balancing on top of this ball, I go, that's what it feels like. Right? So the horse is constantly trying to move this ball in the saddle that is our pelvis,
Exactly.
and we're trying to not let it move, and at the same time balance a ball on a stick. I
The
go,
brain. We got to keep the brain safe.
right, we got to, well, and more importantly, keep the head over the pelvis. Like that's
Hmm.
essential for our balance, is keeping the head over the pelvis.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, in all of your books I have a theory that because you know how bodies are sort of built in specific proportions, like that's how
Hmm.
artists work.
Hmm.
So, in other words, like a weird proportion I learned about was if you put your index finger on the bridge of your nose,
Okay, we're playing with this.
there you go.
Your knuckle.
Your nose always comes to your second knuckle of your index finger.
Okay.
I don't know why,
I
right?
don't
It
know
just
why.
does. But so one of my theories is that our skull fits inside our own pelvis,
Well, that makes total sense.
that we wouldn't have a head that was bigger than our pelvis.
Well, I will have to work on that one.
Although babies, I don't think that's true,
I don't think they fall into that category.
right? So I have to research that and figure it
Yep,
out.
we'll
But
have to geek that out.
I kind of imagine my spine and my head, which is a smaller ball, has to delicately balance like a stick on a plate or a
It
plate on
is.
a stick. I mean,
I call it a bowling ball on top of a pencil.
yeah, it's
That's how I explain it to people.
yeah.
And there's no place. There's no rigid place. It's a relationship
It no
is what's
longer
important.
makes sense to try to make it still if you're on a
Exactly.
moving force. I
Hmm.
go, it doesn't make sense. It can't be still
It can't. It
if the
has to evolve into movement.
it has to adapt in order to be still.
Yep.
And same with the ball that is our pelvis. It's constantly adapting to the forces that are
Hmm.
pushing and pulling on it in order to be still. And that's why
Hmm.
your Alexander technique instructor got that,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not, we think of stillness as rigidness,
As
not
a
moving,
place.
right?
Hmm.
And I go, stillness is kind of a place, but we lose it and find it and lose it and find it and lose it and find it
Exactly.
constantly. It's a back and forth
Hmm.
constant adjustment in order to stay in the same place. That's the big secret
That is the secret of the rider
to,
you want to be like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rider that your horse will appreciate.
Yes. Much better. You'll have much better relationship with your horse.
Yeah. No, and they respond to that dynamically because
Hmm.
it's no different than carrying somebody on our shoulders. I go, how that person on your shoulders is balancing, or a kid in a backpack, even. I go, that's affecting you all the time. You can't get away
Yep.
from it. So I think that really kind of wraps up the whole riding from the inside out
Yeah.
is, until we learn to stabilize that ball on a stick, balancing over a ball that's being moved around all the time. That's our central axis, that pelvis spine
Right.
skull relationship. And until we bring our awareness to that part of our body, we can't stop
No, that's
gripping.
true. You have to become aware first before you can make the change.
Yeah, and we can
Yeah.
become effective riders, but there's always a little bit of a missing the mark. Like it's just not graceful. It doesn't look easy. It
Mhm.
doesn't look beautiful until we really nail that coordination
Mm.
through feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And then when we do nail it, nobody thinks we're working.
Yeah. Oh, that's just easy. You've
Yeah.
been doing it forever. Well,
Yeah. It's a lot of work to make it look natural. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. A lot of conscious control kind of work too.
Exactly.
Oh, so I think we've been around the circle and back. We've been all over the
We're
place with
good.
this topic.
That's a good topic.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us. Oh, and I forgot at the beginning, I still wanted to remind you guys about the Art of the Horseman Online Horse Fair 2025
When is that?
is February 22nd, 23rd. And I am putting
Yay.
a link to the free tickets on
Oh, yay.
with every podcast. It's either in the show notes if you're getting this on podcast platforms, or
Okay.
it's in the description box on YouTube, or I think they call it more now. So I'm presenting there. I've done 4 videos,
Excellent
and
stuff, guys.
please join us.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's free for the 2 days, and then I think they sell an all access pass, but there's like
Oh,
50 presenters.
oh, that's nice. A lot
Yeah.
to choose from.
And I think the all access pass, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it means you can watch the videos after those 2 days.
So you have access.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Because I
that's
think
cool.
there's a boatload of presenters to watch in two
Yeah, you're not
days.
going to be able to see everybody.
Right. Right.
Cool. I'm going to check that out.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.